Just a second. Okay. So coming to the first question, you were given a co-authorship network with certain properties. So the first one was the researchers, they want to publish with new researchers from diverse areas rather than publishing with their existing co-authors. So what generally happens in co-authorship network is generally people are co-authors, they tend to publish more with each other. But what is happening here is in slightly different direction. So if there are two researchers and they have published something with each other, later on each of them will tend to publish with some other people rather than publishing with each other. Secondly, these publications, they are being done in the diverse areas, right? So let's say both of these people, they were from mathematics background. So next time when this guy will do a publication, he will co-author not with a scientist in the maths department, but maybe someone who is in physics department, then next time with someone who is in chemistry, so on and so forth. Then second was they also intend to avoid publishing with those researchers who share publications with their co-authors. So this is very clear in itself. Assume that this guy was publishing with this guy, then what will happen? Generally in triadic closure, if this person co-authors with this person co-authors with this, the probability of this tie increases. But in this case, this probability will reduce. So this guy will avoid publishing a paper with this guy over here. Then third was researchers are more likely to publish with the budding researchers, which are having less number of co-authors. So it is in contradiction with our rich gets richer model. So people, they tend to connect with not the rich people but the poor people who have less number of publications. So the questions were, first question was which network properties are affected by these. So the first one, the researchers, they are publishing with new researchers. So you can see it in different lights. So it basically depends on whether the network which you are considering is a weighted one or an unweighted one. So let's talk about an unweighted one in the beginning. So generally a person, so let's say there are these 5 people in the network. So if they tend to publish with same person again and again, what will happen? Every time this guy is published with this guy. So let's say node 1 publishes with node 2, node 3 co-authors with node 4. And these will be the connections which will remain in the network. Maybe 1 or 2 connection will be added here and there, but mostly they are co-authoring with each other. On the other hand, what is happening in our case, if one has published with 2 already, it will tend to publish with 3 the next time, maybe 4 the next time, 5 the other time, and the same holds for all these nodes. So if you look at this, what is happening? The number of nodes remains the same, but the number of edges is increasing in the network. So the network in the second case, it will have more number of edges, or you can also say that it will have a high density. If in case this was a weighted network, what would happen? So the sum of the weights would remain the same if the other characteristics are same over these two networks. So maybe one publishes, let's say, co-authors 10 papers with 2, here it co-authors 10 papers here, 5 here. So what will happen in this case? One co-authors first paper with second, maybe second paper with third, third paper with fourth, so on and so forth. So what will happen? The weight will get distributed uniformly across the network. On the other hand, what was happening in the first case? The weight was concentrated in particular parts of the network, but here you will see this weight to be dispersed all around the network. Another property which it impacts is definitely assortativity or homophily, because we are saying that researchers, they do not publish in their own field, they tend to publish in diverse fields. So this is a clear indication that the network is going to be disassortative, it will show heterophily. Next is, so the next characteristic of the network is, okay, this one is done. In the context of centrality measures, comment on the inequality or equality between the importance of researchers in this network. So what is happening in this case is, so whenever we talk about centrality measures, what do you think? Will the centrality measures in a random network differ from the centrality measures in a scale-free network? Definitely yes, because what is happening in a random network, every node is more or less the same. So we have seen at the degree distribution, right, which follows a bell-shaped curve. So every node has almost the same degree. There are a few nodes which have lesser degree, few nodes which have higher degree. Or what I can say, in random networks, all the nodes are structurally similar. So in random networks, you don't see much inequality between the importance of nodes. However, in a scale-free network, there are certain nodes which accumulate a lot of degree over time. They have a very high degree, which we call hubs, and there is a greater chance that hubs will have the higher values of centrality measures as compared to the other nodes. What is happening in our case? We are not letting this scale free behavior emerge. So in a network, what is happening? Let's say somehow there was a node, it accumulated a higher degree, but what will happen when new nodes will come in this network? They will not tend to connect to this guy who is popular. They will tend to connect to other people who are less popular. Then comes the next guy, again connects to people who are who are less popular. So this gives a rise to equality in the network. We do not allow a particular node to have higher importance. So whenever we talk about importance, all the nodes will more or less be having the same importance values. Next is propose a network generation model for this scenario. So you can propose a variety of network generation models for this based on different properties. You can merge these models, so on and so forth. I think nobody answered this question in the test. So for me, a very simple network generation model for this will be a random network. So I know that in this network, all the nodes are more or less the same. So I can say that probably they are just connecting randomly, because none of the properties which we studied in real world networks are holding here. So we do not have clustering in this network. People are not so this comes from your second point, that they also intend to avoid publishing with those researchers who share publications with their co-authors. So you don't have triadic closures here, you don't have associativity here, so you don't have any of those properties which we talked about, other than maybe lesser average path length, which is also there in the random networks. So according to me, a random network would be an acceptable answer in this regard. If you want to propose a more advanced network generation model, then you can think about how we worked for other models. So as an example, when we wanted clustering in the network, so we adopted the Watt-Strogatz model. So Watt-Strogatz model, what it does to induce clustering, assume that the nodes, they are laid down in the form of a ring in the network. So they say that connect every node to k nodes on the left and k nodes on the right. So let me assume that the value of k is 2. So this node will be connected to this node and this node, right? And then this node will be connected to this node and this node. This node will be connected to this node and this node. So this is from where clustering was coming. So this node was connected to this, and this node was connected to this, right? So we were forming triangles here. So you'll see triangles every now and then. So there will be a lot of triangles here. What we want is the reverse behavior. We do not want triads in our network. So what we can adopt is an different strategy. So what I can do here is, instead of connecting to the k nearest neighbors, connect to the k farthest neighbors. So if I talk about node 1 here, so the k farthest neighbors for this node will be, let's say, this one here and this one here. Next, coming to this node here, k farthest neighbors will be this node here and this node here. So when you connect these nodes in this particular way, you can observe that there will be no clustering in such a network. So you keep doing this. So this node is connected to these two guys over here, right? And for clustering to happen, these two people should be connected to each other, but we are not connecting this. So if I go on and complete this entire network, you can observe that there won't be even a single triangle in this network. So this is a network having a very less value of clustering, and then yes, to make it more natural, you can randomly rewire some of the edges as we do in the Watt-Strogatz model. Third network generation model which is possible is you can make it based on the non-preferential attachment model. So that is again very straightforward. So what we do in the preferential attachment model, we say that as and when a new node comes, it tries to connect to the node having the highest degree. So let's say there were some existing nodes in the network and a node U has just arrived now. So we say that probability that U connects to a node V, which is already existing in the network, is equal to, or it's proportional to, the degree of the node V here, right? And then we say to make this proportionality equal, we say that it is degree of D divided by sum of the degrees of all the nodes, which is nothing but 2 into the number of edges. In our network, it's the reverse way. So here we can say that probability that U connects to V is inversely proportional to the degree of the node V, right? And to remove that proportionality constant, I can write P of UV equals to 1 divided by degree of V divided by summation of 1 divided by degree of W, where W belongs to V of G. So this was another network generation model was possible here. Any doubts till now? Okay. Coming to the second question. We are living amidst the corona pandemic. As a network scientist, think of a network which best captures the novel COVID-19 spread. So the first part was, what do the nodes and edges represent in this network? So this is again straightforward. So nodes are going to be the people in the network. So these nodes are the people and edges will be the contact network. So if any person comes in contact with any other person, I'll have an edge between them. So this was straightforward. Next was, how does the density of this network change on quarantining the people tested corona positive? So let's say there are some people. So what we are essentially doing is we are quarantining some people. So this is equivalent to removing some nodes from this network, right? Or rather, let me say removing some of the edges. So it depends on how do you see it. So the first way you can see it is, I keep that node in the network, assume that this was the node which was quarantined, right? So I keep this node in the network, but I'll ignore all the edges which are going out because I have quarantined this node. So this node doesn't meet those other people. So in that way, I'm reducing the number of edges, keeping the number of nodes equal. So in that case, the density of this network will reduce. You can answer it another way also. So another way can be, when I quarantine a particular person, I say that I'm actually removing this node from the network itself. In that case, I don't think we can comment on the density because a node is dying away with all of the edges. So density is what? Number of edges divided by n choose 2. So in our first case, n choose 2 remains constant. This was decreasing, so the density decreases. But in this particular case, we are changing both the denominator as well as the numerator. So in that case, I don't think we can comment on density. Next part, with an objective to identify highly central individuals who can potentially accelerate the virus spread, describe the relevance of degree closeness and betweenness centrality. This is again a straightforward question. Again depends on, so in this case it is given that how we are treating individuals. So I say that an individual is more important if he can potentially accelerate the virus more. So in that terms, what does degree closeness and betweenness indicate? So degree definitely indicates the number of people whom I am coming in contact with. So if a person has higher degree, it means that that person can infect a greater number of people. So that is the relevance of degree centrality here. How is degree different from closeness here? So closeness, a person having a greater closeness centrality might be more lethal in the sense that closeness tells me how close a node is with all the other nodes in the network. So assume, so you can explain it with the help of an example. So here, look at this network. So here I have a person who has a very high degree. He has a degree of about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7. And then here I have another individual. So his degree is lesser, but let's say when you compute the closeness centrality, this person is more close to the entire network. However, this person, although he has a higher degree, he is not close to these nodes in the network, right? So in that sense, a person which is having a lesser degree but high closeness, he can be more lethal as compared to the one which is having a higher degree. Betweenness centrality is relevant in the sense that betweenness centrality allows a person to take the virus to altogether a new part of the world. So betweenness, to imagine betweenness centrality, this is the example which we can use. So let's say this is one part of the world where we have quite a lot of people. Let's say this is another country, and this is the person which is connecting these two countries having a higher betweenness. So if this person gets infected, although he has a very less degree or a very less closeness, he is lethal in the sense that he can make an area infected where previously there was not even one infection. And when does this happen? In our contact network, this happens when person they travel overseas, right? So that's why most of the times these are the airports where you will see the highest security against the disease. So there we have the people who can contribute to be the ones who have the highest betweenness centrality in the entire network. Okay, next part. In your proposed network, assume that there is a probability PU associated with every individual. So this probability PU tells is the probability that U is quarantined. So in that case, how will you change the definitions of all these centrality measures, degree, closeness, and betweenness? So let's say a person here, he is having a degree du. So initially we know that the centrality, the degree centrality of this person is the number of neighbors he has. But now we have an additional constraint which is PU. This person can be quarantined. So now what is the importance of this person in terms of transmitting the disease? So his importance will change. So can I say that d dash u, which is the new degree centrality of this person, this is 0 if p of u equals to 1? Because what happens if p of u equals to 1, then there is a guarantee that this person is quarantined. And if this person is quarantined, he essentially holds no importance in terms of transmitting the disease. And d dash of u is going to be 1 if p of u equals to 0. So can I say that d dash u is nothing but d of u into 1 minus pu? I think only Vamshi answered this question correctly. And you can do the same thing with the remaining centrality measures also. So let's talk about, so what is happening? So I take the centrality measure which was previously there associated with this node, and I simply multiply that with 1 minus pu. Please note that not with p of u, it's 1 minus p of u. Same thing you can do with betweenness and closeness centrality also, but you can think of a different answer in the sense that, so this was the answer when I am defining the importance of this person to be related to how important he is in transmitting the disease. We can think of it in another direction. So let's say I know that if a person, he has a high degree, right? A person having a high degree will spread the disease more. On the other hand, a person who is having a high degree is also tend to be more receptive of the disease, because if each of these individuals they are infected, the probability that this guy will get infected increases. So in that terms, you can alter the definitions of the centrality in altogether new sense. So initially, the degree centrality of this node u, let me write it as d of u, it was equal to, let me say it has some k neighbors. So I would write it as 1 plus 1 plus 1 k times, right, which was k. Now, not only this person, its neighbors also tend to be quarantined with certain probability. So now each neighbor, let me say it's neighbor 1, he is quarantined with the probability P1. This neighbor is quarantined with the probability P2, P3, P4, so on and so forth. So now the degree centrality of this person changes. So if all of his neighbors were quarantined, his degree centrality will be what? 0. If some of his neighbors, if all, none of the neighbors was quarantined, that is, let's say, if P of U was 0, then his degree centrality will remain the same, which is K. So now how can I write the degree centrality of U? I can write it as summation of V, where V belongs to the neighbor of U in the network, 1 minus PV. What if we were talking about closeness in this new sense? So I have a person here, and then so previously closeness was I calculate the distance of this person from every other node. So I'm taking a slightly different formula for closeness. So I'm taking distance of this node from first vertex plus the one which we were using for disconnected networks. 1 by distance of this node from the second node, distance of this node from the third node, so on and so forth, right? And now again, each of these nodes, they can be quarantined with certain probability. So I'm going to modify this formula as 1 minus P1 by D1 plus 1 minus P2 by D2, so on and so forth. So it's going to be summation of V, where V is not equals to U, 1 minus P of V divided by distance of U to V. So again, you can extend them in all the different ways. So here what I have done is I have determined the distance of this node. So let's say this was the node under consideration. I have determined the distance of this node from every other node, and after that I have applied this formula. However, you can also argue that not just the distance of this node from other nodes matter. So let's say this was the node I was considering. What also matters is these nodes in between. So what is the probability that these nodes are quarantined? And you can also use that to modify this formula further. What do you do for betweenness now? So again, I have a node here, and for betweenness centrality, we know what we do. We take every other pair of nodes in the network. We look at the shortest path between these nodes, and then we see on what fraction of these shortest paths does this node lie, right? So now what we can do is, instead of simply looking at the number of paths, what we can do is, so there will be certain nodes in this shortest paths. So let's say there were 3 shortest paths between these two nodes, and 2 of those paths passed through this node, and then there was a third path which did not pass through this node. So let me name this P1, P2 and P3. So in our original betweenness centrality, what factor will it contribute in the centrality is 2 by 3. That is, there are 3 shortest paths between these two nodes, and 2 of those paths have this node in between, the one for which we are computing betweenness. What we can do now is, instead of taking these numbers, we can simply add the quarantine probability of these nodes. Note the quarantine probability 1 minus P of, let me say, V, right? Summation of 1 minus PV for every V which lies on this node for path 1, then the same thing for path 2, and in the denominator you can have these summation factors for all the paths for P1, P2 and P3. Okay. So any doubts here? These were the solutions. So please note that these are not the exact solutions. So all of these questions require thinking, and they can be answered in a variety of ways. Now I'll be moving to community structures. So till now the motivation with which we started this course was, when you look at the networks in graph theory, so something like a complete network or a Peterson graph or a bipartite network, or a path graph, so on and so forth, or a tree graph. So those networks, they are very well organized. You'll see a network like this or a network like this. The point was, our real world networks are not that well organized. So if you look at real world networks, at first they will appear to be random, and then we have seen that these networks are not exactly random. So we can say that they are not this well organized also, and they are also not completely random. They lie somewhere in between, and from that point we started looking at the characteristics of real world networks. We discussed about three models. The first one was the Erdős-Rényi model for random networks. Second was Watt-Stugatz network for small world network. And then third was the Barabasi network for scale-free networks. So Barabasi network is the one which is quite popular even today. Today we are going to talk about a network property which is not even captured by the Barabasi-Albert model. So Barabasi-Albert model gives you a degree distribution which is like the degree distribution of real world networks, but there are again certain characteristics which are not completely captured by this model, and community structure is one such characteristic. Just give me a moment. Wanted to show a network having community structure to you. I'm pasting a link in the chat window. Can you just open this network and see? So this is one real world network in which you can see community structure, to give you an idea of how it looks like. Let me share my screen. Okay, so you can see this network having community structure on my screen. So every community is here shown in a different color, and you might be getting some idea of what is happening here. So if I see this small group which is located over here, it's a different community in its own. So every small group is a different community, plus the nodes which are densely connected in one part of the network, they are another community, so on and so forth. So do you think your Barabasi-Albert graph creates such kind of communities? It focuses mostly on degree distribution, and what you get at the end is one network in which you really do not have many communities or many dense groups which are connected with each other. So now also this community structure, it's quite clear that it happens because of assortativity. So why will such a structure emerge in a network? This is because people who are alike, they tend to connect more with each other. So maybe in a classroom, students who are in the same geographical area tend to connect more with each other, or those having same genders connect more with each other. In protein interaction networks, proteins which have same functions connect with each other. In a web graph, the pages which belong to the same topic, they will connect more with each other. Most of the times when you get this network, the node characteristics are lost. So figuring out which node belongs to which community will be very easy if we have an attribute. So if I know that all these people who are in red here, they belong to Punjab, let's say, or the people who are in blue here, they belong to Haryana, people who are in yellow there, they belong to Bangalore. So if I have those characteristics, then I can portray this network very easily. So I'll denote every node which belongs to Punjab in red color, one who is in Bangalore in yellow color, so on and so forth. But the problem is, by the time we get these networks, all the attributes are lost. and what we have is only the nodes and the edges. Then how do you detect which people are in the same region or which web pages are in the same category, and so on and so forth. So before even coming up with a model which can create a network having community structure, the question which we have at hand is how do you detect this community structure in a network? So let's say you are given a network and the attributes of all the nodes are lost. So how do you determine whether they belong to the same community or not? Once you detect community structure, you can definitely use it for a lot of things. For example, recently I was discussing this question with some of the faculty in our college. So you might have heard of this Opera web browser, which is Mini Opera, and particularly which is mostly used in mobile phones. So what this Mini Opera does is it runs an ad network. So this ad network, it decides which ads to show to the people on which particular websites. So these ad networks, community detection is one of the central problems which these face. So once you have people, can you cluster those people? Can you have certain communities of these people? So that I know that these are the people which fall in the community sports, these are the people which fall in, let's say, community academics, and I show relevant advertisements to these people. Makes more sense in Facebook where people are connected with each other. So they'll be connected with each other based on certain attributes, and then those can be used to show ads to those people. So coming back to our question, assume that you have a network, the attributes are lost now, and you have to predict communities in this network. So let me give you an example. Let's say I have this network here. And I'm asking you to predict communities in this network. So here it's very simple, right? I can look at this network and I can directly tell you, yeah, this is one community, this is one, this is one. But most of the times, the problem which we deal with is for the network. So what if I give you a Facebook network? So this was a very small network. I can just start it out in on a paper in the way I like. Now you should here also note that I have drawn this network in this particular way. So I could have drawn this network in some other way, and then it would be difficult for you to predict the communities. So I can also draw this network as something like this. So I can draw this network in some sense of overlapping edges and edges cutting each other in such a way that you won't be able to see this kind of a structure. So there it will be difficult for us to tell what is the community structure. So can you think of an algorithm which you can use here? Assume that I give you a network, some nodes and certain edges. Assume that this is this network only, right? So when you look at this network, you can right away tell which are the three communities. How will you make a computer do this? Can you think of a way? Have you heard about cut vertices and cut edges? So cut vertex is essentially a node in the graph. If you delete that node, your graph will uh, become disconnected. Similarly, cut edge is an edge which if you remove from the network, again the graph will become disconnected. And now I can have a cut set. Cut set is maybe when you remove one vertex from the graph, it won't become disconnected. Maybe if you remove more than one vertex, it can become disconnected. So in this graph, I know that if I delete these two edges from the graph or leave these two edges, if I remove this edge from the graph, it will become disconnected. So this particular edge in my graph, it is a cut edge. Similarly, this edge, it's also a cut edge. You remove these edges and you can see the components. So that can be one algorithm which you can use. What if you also had an edge here? Still your communities will remain the same. But now if you remove any particular only one edge from this network, the network won't become disconnected. So now if you remove this edge from here, the network still remains connected. So in that case, this problem converts into a well-known problem of graph partitioning. Can you figure out a subset of edges which if removed from the graph will become disconnected? We can portray it something like this. And we always try to figure out the minimum partition. So let's say my network looks something like this, right? So this is my minimum partition in this network. If I remove these three edges from the network, it will become disconnected. Can we use this approach to predict communities? And what can be the problem? So problem with this approach is this graph partitioning problem. It's actually an NP-hard problem. Do you know what are NP-hard problems? Satvik, Harshit, Vamshi. Can someone tell me which are the problems in P?
Ma'am,
Yes, Harshit.
I heard them, but I do not remember, ma'am.
Okay. Can you guess?
Time complexity problems, ma'am.
Time complexity problems. Yes. So problems in P are those which you can solve in polynomial times. Problem in NP are those which you cannot solve in polynomial time. But if someone gives you a solution, you can verify it in polynomial time. So consider, as an example, consider a game of Sudoku, right? So if I ask you to solve a puzzle of Sudoku, it might take you 1 hour or 2 hours. But if I give you a solution to that puzzle and I ask you to verify whether it's correct or not, you can very easily do that. So similar is the difference between P and NP hard problems. So this problem is NP hard, so you cannot solve it in polynomial time. That's why we generally do not use graph partitioning algorithm for community detection. Okay. So we are going to discuss a few community detection algorithms. I'm not going to go into the details of those algorithms. I'm going to give you an intuition. After that, you can have a look at them in the reference material. Furthermore, there are a large number of community detection algorithms. People have been working on it like for 50s or hundreds of years. So there would be like, I think, thousands of community detection algorithms. But the most important of these community detection algorithms are already implemented. So you can look at some R functions and try to detect communities. So do that at your end. Take a network, maybe a Jackery Karate Club network or Facebook network, and try to implement community detection algorithms using R on that. Now, no matter whichever community detection algorithm we use, the one thing which remains common in all of them is, which is indispensable, is how do you tell how well your algorithm has predicted the communities. So let's say you gave me a network. So something like this, and I told you, okay, well, I ran an algorithm on this, and I told you, okay, these two nodes are in one community, and let's say these nodes are in the other community. So can you tell me how well have I predicted these communities? How do you tell me whether it's a good prediction or a bad prediction? Given that you do not have the attribute values. So definitely if you have the attribute values, you know that, okay, fine, these 4 are girls and these 2 are boys, then you can tell me that the algorithm has done really good. But we do not have those attributes, and I give you these two partitions, or let's say these two sets of nodes. How do you tell me whether it's a what do I say, good prediction or not? For example, in this case, let's say this was the graph, and I tell you, okay, this is one community, this is one, this is one. You can tell me that I have done a good job. You can see it. It seems like these are the 3 communities. On the other hand, what if I would have told you, okay, this is one community, and this is another community, and this is another community. then you won't say I have done a good job. So what are you essentially looking for?
In the previous thing, there are more clustered thing, ma'am. So we can check the cluster coefficient and betweenness of closeness of in the given components, ma'am.
Okay, so think about it in terms of nodes and edges. So let's look at it again. So let us take a smaller example. Let's say this is a network and I'm going to make 2 copies of it. My first algorithm says this is one community and this is another community. My second algorithm says this is one community and this is another community. So which result do you think is better?
Left side one, ma'am.
How do you say, why are you saying it is clustered? Can you go in some more basic terms and tell me what differs? So I'm also here coloring the nodes according to the community which is predicted. So these are the predictions. Can you think of a very basic characteristic here which you can use to tell me that this is a good prediction and this is not?
Ma'am, I think the first one has closure properties, while the second one doesn't display any closure.
Closure means, Vamshi?
Between nodes.
Closure between nodes. Okay, I think what Vamshi is trying to do you mean to say by closure the number of edges between the nodes? So here if you look at these nodes in the first community, you see many edges between them. So I have 3 edges here between these green nodes. And again I have 3 edges here between these purple nodes. And I have 1 edge between the green nodes and the purple nodes. Right. So if I combine these, let me say if I combine these as, let me say this is my green community and this is my purple community. So I have 3 edges inside this, 3 edges inside this, and I have 1 edge running between these two. On the other hand, if I do this with the second graph here, so let me look at the green community here. So between the green nodes, I have 2 edges, and then between the purple nodes, I have only one edge, and across the 2 clusters, I have how many edges? 1, 2, 3, 4. So do you see the difference? Here I have 3 and 3 inside clusters and 1 across clusters. Here I have 2 and 1 inside clusters and 4 across clusters. So I can use this as a measure, right? So these number of intercluster ties should be less. This number should be less, and the number of intra-cluster ties should increase. These numbers should be high. So in this case it's happening so, in this case it's not happening so. So I'll say that it's a bad predictor. So it's exactly the same as what we did for assortativity. So let me recall assortativity. So what we were doing in assortativity is, I had to see whether a network has assortativity or not. So we compared it with a baseline. So let's say there were 2 groups, males and females. So our baseline there was a complete network. And what we did in this complete network, let me say there are M males and F females. So in a complete network of M males and F females, so we said that a complete network is one which neither shows homophily nor shows heterophily. It is neutral. So in that neutral network, what we had was, we said that fraction of male to male ties was, in case it's a directed network, this, right? So M to M, there can be M square edges between males and M plus F square between females, and fraction of MF or FM ties, it was this, and fraction of female to female was this. And what we did was, whatever network we have at hand, so let me say there was some network I was at hand, and I had the attribute values. So I was given, okay fine, this is male, this is female, this is male, this is female, this is male, this is female. It was given to me. So based on these labelings, I looked at the fraction, and if my fraction of male to male and female to female, if it was significantly higher than this number, then I said that the network exhibits homophily. Otherwise, it shows heterophily. So we are going to do exactly the same thing. So what in the previous case I was given the labels, but in current case I am not given these labels. So these labels are not given to me. So what I'll do, I'll run a community detection algorithm on this graph, and that algorithm will give me some labels. So that algorithm will say, okay fine, these nodes are in one community and all these 4 nodes are in another community. So it might say these 2 are females and these are males. And then again I can compare these against these numbers, female to female ties, male to male ties, and if their fraction is higher than the sum of these 2 fractions, I can say that there is community in the network, or the network shows assortativity. So in community detection, the measure which we use for this, telling whether the prediction is good or not, it is called modularity. And it is slightly different from what we do in assortativity. So here we compare our actual network against a complete network. In the case of modularity, what we are going to do, we are going to have our actual network here, and we'll compare this actual network against a random network, not against a complete network, and a random network with the same degree sequence. So what is the motivation here? So motivation here is, if I have to tell you whether there is community structure or not, or whatever labels I have spitted out to you, whether those labels are correct or not. So what I'm going to do is, let me say this is my actual network. So I have some nodes and let's say some edges here. Let's say now I run a community detection algorithm on this graph. So it tells me, okay, this is in C1, this is also in C1, this is in C1, this is in C1, this is in C2, and this is in C2. So how do I tell you how good is this prediction? So what we are going to do, we are again going to take these same nodes here in a random network. So I'm going to construct a random network which has the same number of nodes, same number of edges, and also maintaining this degree distribution. So in my new network also, this node will be having a degree 3, this node will also be having a degree 3, this node will be having a degree 2, this will also have degree 2, and these two will also have a degree 1 each, right? But the edges will essentially not be in this way. The edges can run in any particular way, right? And then the labels are the same. So C1, 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 C2, C2, right? So if my prediction is good, what will happen? If I look at the edges here across communities, so here I'll see very less edges across communities. But in a random network, I should see more edges across communities, because what I'm doing when I'm making this graph random, I'm just rewiring all these edges. So when I rewire these edges, what should happen? that community structure should be disturbed. I should have more edges running between two partitions. So what I'm going to do is always, whenever I have to predict modularity, I'll take this network, I'll randomly rewire this network in some other network, and then I'll compare these two networks, whether this network is doing better or not in terms of my intra-cluster edges. So I'll stop here today. I'll take this thing in detail in the next class. If you have any doubts here, feel free to discuss with me. So the intuition behind modularity should be clear. So you can also look at it like, let's say I'm giving you a physical specimen of this. So I'm giving you certain balls which are connected with certain sticks, right? And and I am telling you that there are certain communities in this. So a specimen of this order. So what I am asking you to do next is, you take a random network in which edges are dispersed here and there, and you put this entire specimen on the top of this one, right? And then you see how much difference there is. I'll also leave some reference videos in the Google spreadsheet. So there are a lot of nice videos online to understand this further. So if you have any doubt till now, let me know. So how we are going to do this rewiring and how we are actually going to compare these inter-cluster ties, we'll be doing that in the next class.